termination versus extension option. It's interesting. That's one of the bullet points. If you think about it, let's assume you have a 10-year lease with a termination option at the end of 5, meaning at the end of 5 years, tenant can terminate the lease and walk away, right? That's really no different to a certain extent from a 5-year lease with a 5-year option, right? A 10-year lease with a 5-year termination versus a 5-year lease with a 5-year extension option. If you think about it, basically it puts the tenant in the same position, right? At the end of 5 years, the tenant can walk away on either situation or extend it or stay for the full 10 years. But here's the important difference. In a 10-year lease with a 5-year termination, the landlord is considering this a 10-year lease. And number one, is paying its broker based upon the rents for 10 years, is providing an allowance to the tenant improvement allowance, based upon a 10-year lease, meaning the landlord will receive 10 years of rent, and based upon those rentals can what's called amortize the costs over the full 10 years, right? So the tenant will do a lot better in a 10-year lease with a 5-year termination option. But here's the catch. In a 10-year lease with a 5-year termination, the landlord's going to say, okay, I will let you terminate after 5 years, but you have to repay me some of these costs. In other words, since I'm only recouping 5 years of these costs rather than 10 years, in essence, the landlord may ask for 50% of those costs back for the tenant. 50% of the brokerage commission, 50% of the tenant improvement allowance, and whatever other possible free rent. So these will all be conditions for the tenant to terminate. That the landlord will require a tenant to make what's called a termination payment as part of their right to terminate. On the flip side, the 5-year lease with the 5-year extension option, the landlord's going to look at this as like a 5-year lease and only provide a tenant improvement allowance based upon a 5-year lease. Won't give them it'll be probably half the allowance. So, and again, the brokerage commission will be based upon only a 5-year commission. So there'll be nothing for the tenant to repay. That's sort of the difference. The advantage from a tenant standpoint is obvious. On a 10-year deal, tenant has fixed the rent for the 10 years and basically knows what it will be paying for the 10 years. And if it decides to terminate, will make that payment. But on a 5-year with a 5-year renewal, only gets rent certainty for 5 years, because after those first 5 years, there might be this fair market value lease renewal clause that we talked about before, with the arbitration and et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically the distinction here between a termination and a renewal.